Welcome to All the F Words,
a podcast where two writer friends, nearly 30 years apart, explore everything we give an F about. I'm Gabby Moskowitz.
And I'm Joanne Green. On each episode of All the F Words, we'll focus on a theme starting with the letter F. Things like fame, fortune, femininity, and fabulosity.
We'll share stories from our lives and our distinct generational perspectives and look to the experts for insights and ideas.
Today, we present a special edition of All the F Words, a Jewish edition. Gabby and I are members of the same synagogue, and our rabbi, Stacy Friedman, had the idea of having us do a live Zoom event focusing on Yiddish words and words that are important to the Jewish people that begin with the letter F.
And there was no shortage of words at our fingertips. Words like Farklempt and Farputzt,
Farblondget and Farklempt.
We're joined on part of this episode by Batalion and Jamie Elman of the web series YidLife Crisis.
And if you're at all familiar with Yiddish terms, things like schlep and schmuck and schmutz, you will be laughing.
And stick around for our thoughts on Fiddler on the Roof, faith, fasting, feasting, and freedom.
For openers, how is it that you speak Yiddish?
We have a book.
Oh, you've been reading the Easy Schmeeziga?
All right. Was there a question?
There was a question.
Don't worry, I'll field it. Keep learning.
Okay.
Quickly.
Go ahead.
Very
Laser.
quickly.
Go ahead, Laser.
Fargenigen, or pleasure. Notice the F, or fey, and we'll get into the feyness of it all, to be here on behalf of Jaime and myself, or Jamie and myself. I think we know you both from different worlds, and it's nice that it's all coming together. I see that Danny Green's cell phone just joined, so now I feel like the whole mishpacha has accumulated here into a giant Farbrengen, or assembly, if you will. So we're just getting started here. We're going to be here all week, just getting started. You want to know how we speak Yiddish. So I don't know how much time you have, but I'll try to do the Redux version, which in Jewish terms means 25 to 30 minutes. We grew up in Montreal, and we actually, and I'll cut to the chase, we actually went to a high school that taught the Yiddish language. It's called Bialik High School. Anyone here heard of Bialik at all?
Well, various Bialiks.
There's various Bialik, and they're all somehow related to our high school. But the one being named for Chaim Nachman was this Hebrew and Yiddish poet, and this school that we went to taught the Yiddish language. It also taught Hebrew as well, and so we were exposed to the Yiddish language. I'm not going to say we picked it up as well as we have from the book that Jamie was just sharing, but we got little bits and pieces, shticklich, if you will, of the Yiddish language. And from there, that formed a bit of a foundation, which later in life, Jamie and I would team up and realize this could form the foundation for something, a homage, if you will, to our Yiddish upbringing, to the language, and growing up Jewish in Montreal. Was that 25
And are
minutes?
most of your fans over a certain age, people who grew up surrounded by Yiddish?
Yeah, I'd say probably a large majority of our audience are in their 200 to 300 at this point. They left Anatevka. No, our audience. The thing is that just to explain, the web series that we created, which is in Yiddish, is subtitled. It is meant for the likes of you writers 30 years apart. It's meant to be watched mainly in English. We actually write the show in English, and the show is holy shizzle, Gabby, there's somebody behind you. Do you know that?
I actually thought it was a fake virtual background. Unless it's well timed.
Okay, no, there's someone there. Okay, all right. I'm just making.
It's my husband.
Sorry.
Okay,
good. No.
But good looking out. Good looking out.
Yeah. No problem. Anyways, yes, we make this Yiddish web series that discusses Jewish culture, Jewish concepts, and the Jewish crisis, how to be Jewish in the modern world, and how we wrestle with these things. We call it the crisis. For some people, it's more so, for some less so. But in terms of the Yiddish, very few people in the world actually speak Yiddish. Mostly it's the ultra-Orthodox Jews. From what we understand, they don't watch our show. If they do, they're not allowed to tell us. So we'll never know.
And let's highlight the difference between dropping the occasional Yiddish word and you guys actually speak Yiddish. You speak the language.
Who said that? Who told you that?
Yeah, let's throw these right now.
You appear to on your video.
We appear.
Sure, we'll go with that one. We'll go with that
I
one.
want to tell you something. I was on a TV show called House once where I was performing an autopsy. I appeared to know how to perform an autopsy. Laser, why don't you tell them about the Yiddish? Sure, go ahead. Explain Yiddish for a little bit.
Well, I think there is obviously within the American or North American lexicon, there are quite a few Yiddishisms. Of course, that's very Ashken-normative in its approach, but many people are familiar with the various forms of kvetch and schlep, the odd schmuck or putz or schmendrick here and there. But what many
Why are there so many words in Yiddish for that body part?
That's very interesting. Well, I was going to get to another F word. Well, it's all in the Easy Schmeezy Guide, first of all. I was going to get to another word, Farshtunken, which means stinking, and get into the notion of Jewish comedy and German comedy, in fact, which apparently exists, where this is all comedy is comes from the body in specific. And we seem to come from this background. So the schmuck putz obsession, I mean, I think it comes from a neurotic obsession about that body member and that what it's doing or not doing for us at any particular time.
Or body, bodies in general. Jews, we are obsessed with our. And, when Jews cuss each other out, right? In Yiddish, what do they say? Gay kacken and yam. Go defecate in the sea, right? That's a Yiddish that's a Yiddish curse. That's a Yiddish insult. We put our own spin on it sometimes. Gay kaken in Yam HaMelech. Go defecate in the Dead Sea. Or if you really are, if you're really in cos with someone, if you're really angry with them, you might say gay kaken noifin levana. Go defecate on the moon. So why did Jews have these? Because we're obsessed with the sweating and the bodily functions, and it comes out in the language.
As it
were.
I
could add, it's not like you can have traditions like the one we have in French Canadian Catholicism. That's all about defiling God. But for us, it's not about God. It's just about our putrid bodies. That's what we're upset. Yeah. By the way, gay Kakanoif and Levana, that's a good one for Bezos. I think the only way you can make him feel bad about himself is letting him know that Yiddish insult. If you meet him.
Yeah.
It's in the back pocket. It is in the back
pocket. So to speak.
So Jamie, what's a favorite Yiddish word in your lexicon?
I mean, there really are so many. My partner Laser already dropped a few of them, but one that I do like a lot is that I'm going to go with today is Farblondget, which means lost. But really, it's more than lost. It's lost in the way that the Yiddish and only languages like Yiddish that are so rich and colorful and deep can truly give you the complexity of lost. You know what I mean? Like kvetch, just to throw it to a different thing we're saying. Kvetch, people think it's complain, but we understand, Jews understand. Kvetch isn't to complain, it's to enjoy complaining, to relish in the complaints.
It actually literally means squeeze.
Okay. By the way, Ellie was the valedictorian. Was the Yiddish valedictorian at Bialik High School. So he's one of the only ones that I allowed to correct my Yiddish. Him and the Belzer Rebbe are both allowed to. And also Mrs. Gandel, my Yiddish teacher from Bialik. But Farblondget is lost, like lost, like how lost? Like the Israelites were lost, getting to the Holy Land. That was Farblondget. But they were also spiritually Farblondget. You know what I mean?
It's always a whole paragraph. You cannot define a Yiddish word with a word, right?
No. This here, speaking of this chapter here, it's hard to see this, but this whole thing is just on Farblondget. And the other funny thing is that this entire section here is all devoted to Yiddish words for penis. So over 150 pages. I'm just kidding. The guy who wrote this is going to kill me if he sees it. You're all looking at me saying that nothing I've said is okay. Farblondget, you're lost. Okay, there you go. There's my F word. Okay. I was also
your favorite, Ellie.
Okay, no, actually, I'm going to say Laser. Go ahead.
No, you have another one.
No, I want to. No,
I love that. That was perfect.
No,
that's my favorite.
Ellie, go ahead. No, because I have another flow that I'm gonna go ahead. I'm writing something down.
My approach is more buffet. There's no particular favorite that I'm ordering here. It's just at the buffet. I'm gonna throw a few out there. First of all, Farklempt, which means to sell. Kaufen. Have you ever heard the name Kaufman? Kaufman is a buyer, but Farklempt is to sell. And clearly that's what we are doing as a people on a regular basis. So I think it's very important that people know that as another far. Another, I mentioned Farshtunken, I'm going to say Farkakt or Farkakte, which really means, and there's no English word for it, but I guess it means indefecated, that which has been imbued with defecation, I believe would be the term. And this is also deeply part of the body. And that's basically like in terms of the F word, swear word, F word, Farkakte is probably the closest to the English F word that you have out there.
Jimmy, how would you define Farkakte?
I would define it as my partner, as Ellie Batalion, as him.
Yes.
Listen, there can't be Farkakte though unless you have what to put inside you first, and that would be Fristig. Laser, you didn't think I was going to pull that one?
I didn't think you were going to pull
breakfast. Fristig. Is a great F word in Yiddish. And also I remember another one that I like because we talk about, we're from Montreal, and our parents, our families, our people, our tribe, our Shavit, if you will, goes to Florida. That's another F word. An important Jewish F word is the state of Florida. And the people that go to Florida from Montreal, from the Northeast, you probably know, are called the snowbirds. Well, that is in Yiddish, Schnee Fegelich. Fegelich is birds, Schnee Yiddish. The Schnee Fegelich are the tribe of descendants that basically made up of
and yet the word Fegelich was used in a very different way. Am I right?
True, but it really does mean bird. That is actually the term, and it's still used to this day. But yes,
little bird? Is it a little bird?
Yes.
Yeah,
yes,
bird. And a fegele is a littler bird. Not to be confused with flegel, which is little fly, or I think just fly.
Isn't a flegel a wing?
Exactly. Yes.
Flegel, but flegel is a fly.
Flegel is not to be confused with flagel. Gotcha.
Yes.
Okay.
Huge dinner faux pas. Don't get that wrong at your next.
I take it flagel is not a flat bagel. Have you seen those before? Those are called flagels.
Where?
Gabby, I did not think I was going to have to introduce it. We're from Montreal, where we take bagels very seriously. It looks like we're going back to the basics here. Okay, I have B for bagel here. Do we need to explain to you what? No, it's not a flagel. You know what? And also, don't pronounce it a bagel. And anyway. It's okay. No, we're very touchy. As Montrealers, we're touchy about the.
We spent 24 hours in Montreal, and Ellie gave us an actual virtual tour of bagel shops, and we got to compare one over another. And I'm telling you, New Yorkers think that the best bagels are in New York. I hear that Berkeley is now making a run for the best bagels, but I would not compete with Montreal bagels.
They're good.
You'd be right not to. We don't want to have a fight here. There's another F word. We didn't come here to have a fight.
No.
Let's not talk about the bagels in Berkeley. Please. Okay. Anyways, by the way, sorry, Ellie, before I forget, I wrote this down at the beginning. Joanne said something I think that was good. We should come back to this for our show later. Jews just want to have, no, it was the rabbi who said Jews.
Yes, Rabbi Stacy said that.
Rabbi Stacy, that's good. We should do something with that. When the working day, Jews just want to, we should do something with that. Huh?
Credit
okay,
her,
sorry,
though.
this is not the time to get, absolutely. Credit her with it.
What are you people?
What are you guys working on these
Cindy
days?
Lauper sorry, Rebbitzin, Cindy Lauper. Sorry, Laser, tell them what we're working on.
We're working on Cindy Lauper songs. No, we a bunch of different things. We actually, so speaking of, Jamie was talking about how we had purposed everything in English. Really, our web series is for English speakers, and we do things in the Yiddish language, but ultimately for English speakers. I'm not sure how relevant this will be to your audience, but we actually translated our entire series into French, because where we're at in Montreal, as you well know, Joanne, I'm sure Gabby, you know as well, is entirely French Quebecois environment where they know very little about Jews. So in the spirit of rapprochement.
But they love them.
Yeah, in a very sarcastic way. Yeah, so we're trying to do our part by sort of spreading Jewish comedy and Jewish food out to the Quebecois society. So we translate on French. We're putting that out there. We do gigs in various places and we were just in New York, actually. We have a documentary, Judaism, A Taste of Jewish Montreal, which we think is very apropos for yourselves and for your audience. If you go to YidLifeCrisis.com, you can actually see the documentary, which has pieces, shtiklach, if you will, of the tour that Joanne went on in Montreal, explaining the history of Jewish Montreal through our food, which is really critical to how we tell the story and how we view our history in Montreal, including those beautiful bagels that you can check out. So if you go to YidLifeCrisis.com, you can see that and a bunch of other stuff, including a lot of our videos.
If you can see Fred Green's background right now, he switched it to a place that to some is called Saint Theater, to us is called the Heilichen Beis Hamikdash, if you will, the holy temple of Saint Theater Bagels. We highly recommend you go there and have a frische, there's another F word, a fresh Heise bagel from Montreal when you come. And we hope to come back. We were doing our live show up in the Bay Area. It's been, I think, 4 or 5 years since we were there.
Well, there was a pandemic.
There was, but now what's your excuse? No, I'm just listen. The point is, is it still going on? Let us know. We hear weird things about what's happening up there in the northern part of the state. No, we'd love to come back and schmear our shtikarei with you folks. So we did have a good time.
We will schmooze.
Yes, we will farbring. We will come together, and we hope to see you up there soon.
Great. Thanks so much for joining us tonight.
Thanks.
Ashamed and done.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Night. Bye, everyone.
So once again, that's YidLifeCrisis.com, and I highly, highly recommend it. You know, there are so many more Yiddish F words. Should we go right to the Jewish broader spectrum or stick with some more of the F words that we haven't yet touched?
Why don't we start with we compiled a couple of lists. So why don't we start with since we're on the subject of Yiddish, let's start with Yiddish and we'll move into the rest of our list as we go down. Yeah.
Lay them on me.
All right. So let's start with, well, first of all, one thing we didn't talk about is the spelling of Yiddish F words is a little, as we were working on this list, we found that there are many F, the spelling, it's a transliteration, right? And so we're just sort of doing our best, but there are some that start with F and some that start with V.
For instance, is it Farklempt, as I always said, or is it Verklempt, as some people say? I mean, we could vote. Raise your hands if it's Farklempt. I'm seeing some hands. How about Verklempt? Raise your hands. I can only see, I'm not seeing the whole gallery view, so I don't know. What's winning?
The first time I ever heard Farklempt was on Coffee Talk on Saturday Night Live. Mike
Myers, also, I believe, from Montreal or somewhere in Canada.
Yeah, I don't know if he's Jewish. I think he certainly
I don't think so. I'm seeing a lot of shaking heads. I don't think he is, but he nailed it. He nailed it. Right?
Yeah.
Coffee Talk.
Absolutely.
And he kept saying,
Absolutely.
I'm so verklempt. And he basically single-handedly put the word into the English language, which it now
Yes.
is, right? Now people don't know it's Yiddish. They just say it. But they don't say it with a V,
Do
they
you
say it with the
remember
F.
when was the last time you were verklempt? Most recently.
On Mother's Day, I had the
Aw.
unbelievable pleasure of having lunch with my daughter-in-law and my soon-to-be daughter-in-law. And
Aw.
I started telling them how wonderful they are and what it means to me that they're in my life. And I started crying and they started crying and we all started crying and we were totally verklempt.
Oh, that's so sweet.
Yeah. And it's
Also
true.
verklempt. That's so great.
Tell me about your most recent verklemptedness.
So I too was verklempt on Mother's Day. For those
I'm
who
guessing
don't
a different
know,
reason.
well, no, it was very sweet. For the last week, my husband has had shingles and my babysitter has had COVID. So it's been a time. But my daughter, Anna, gave me, it was the first card she'd ever made me. And it was the cutest, sweetest thing. And after a really crazy intense week, it was so sweet. And I felt, I kind of kept it together in the moment. And then I really was very overwhelmed. So it's like, I felt all different. There've been all different kinds of verklempt over the last few weeks, but this was a good one. So,
but this verklempt basically means overcome with emotion, which happens to us a lot. I mean, I think there are certain people or certain peoples in the world who are more even keeled. Is that fair to say than, for instance, Ashkenazi Jews generally, or maybe Jews, period?
Writer Jews generally.
You know, I'm talking straight up, straight down, straight up, straight. So we live in this world of verklempt, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. Let's keep moving down the list. So we talked about Fegele. Now, you have on this list Farbitzed. It's a person, and you have it in a Boston accent. A person who's never
had everything in Yiddish in a Boston accent, so I don't really know how to say these words properly because they were always said with a Boston accent in my childhood. So it's Farbitzed. And also, did you notice when Jamie and Ellie were talking, there are a lot of hand motions involved in Yiddish. So not only is it an entire paragraph to explain a term, but there's a lot of this.
I want to take this moment to formally apologize to Fred, who edits our podcast, because the gesticulation that we both do surely, he's nodding, surely gives him a lot to work with. I know.
At least we're not smacking the microphone with our hands.
Or, dropping it or something like that when we think we've made a good point. That's true. That's very collected of us. Okay, so a Farbissener, somebody who's never happy, somebody who's bitter. I've never said that word before. Do you know anyone like this?
Do you know anyone?
Absolutely. Sure. I'm not going to say who, but yeah, I do.
But I mean, there are these people who, maybe complain, who maybe walk around with an expression like this.
My Aunt Randy just commented, young Frankenstein, Frau Farbissena.
Ah, oh, that is good. I forgot about that. That's very good. People might say their mother-in-law, right? Can't be pleased.
Yeah.
Not my daughters-in-law, of course, but others.
Yeah. Okay, we talked about Farblondget. We talked about Farklempt. Fermisht, which is, I've heard that before.
Is it Fermisht or is it Fermisht? I don't know, because again, with a Boston accent, it's Fermisht.
I think but it could be Fermisht. A lot more Yiddish than I did. Well, it seems like
there go the 30 years, sweetheart. That's it right there. So Yiddish was the first language for both of my parents. They spoke Yiddish at home, and my mom would tell that my parents were born in 1910 and 1913, one in Providence, Rhode Island, and one in New York, in the Bronx, and then later moved to the Boston area. But their parents spoke Yiddish, period, in the home. And my mom talked about going to school, kindergarten, I think, and not knowing which words in her vocabulary were English and which ones were Yiddish, and saying something in Yiddish and everyone in the class laughing, and she burst into tears and went home and told her parents that they had to learn English and they had to start speaking English because she wanted to be fully American. And for years she talked about how her brother still drank tea out of a glass, because that's what their parents did. So growing up how many of you, raise your hand if you grew up around Yiddish speaking people? Yeah, and I think it's really generational. So our kids didn't grow up around that. It just wasn't happening as much. So they had to get their Yiddish from Mike Myers, which is a shanda, don't you think? A shanda means a shame.
But at the same time, when I think the flip side of the Mike Myers thing, even if Mike Myers wasn't Jewish, I do remember, especially sort of in the heyday of primetime network television, when I was growing up in the 90s, whenever I would hear, like, one thing that maybe isn't quite as true now, but definitely in the 80s, 90s, early aughts, when TV writers were writing characters on TV, they were always sort of vague about religion. You know, they would sort of allude to Christmas, but it was everybody wanted to do well in all the states with all the markets. So you wouldn't see like a lot of explicit religion one way or the other. But I always noticed, like on Friends, the show Friends, certain characters would use more Yiddish than other characters. And I remember it was always that was kind of, I think, the writers winking at you and saying, well, look, we're not going to say Rachel Green is Jewish, but like Rachel Green is Jewish. And she just called someone a schmuck. So it's kind of your clue. So,
right. You know. Well, so many of the writers, television writers, were and are Jewish. So it sneaks its way in. Absolutely. Well, one word that we found that I didn't even know was a Yiddish word, and it's such a great word, is feh. Feh. F-E-H. A fabulous word, right? And not a word that you can define with a single word.
Well, it's an onomatopoeia, right? It's a word that sounds like how you emote the feeling of feh, right?
We actually recently taught our granddaughter that word, and we were trying to come up with, like, we said buzz for what bees say. Feh is a perfect one. I'll have to add that to the list. Onomatopoeic words, is that how you would say that?
Yeah, sure.
So for Jewish edition, there are also plenty of non-Yiddish words, like, for instance, faith. And I bring that up because you don't necessarily have to have it to be Jewish.
Yeah.
It is an absolute component of being a Christian. If you don't have faith, you can't say you're a Christian, but you can be a Jew because your mother was a Jew, or because you can be any one of a million other reasons.
You can be a religious Jew and not really have faith. You can abide by all the practices. And I know lots of people who do and don't really believe in God, because it's almost like the culture of Judaism is kind of its own thing, and participating in that, and the study and the rituals are, for some people, that's enough without the faith, I think.
My understanding is that it's all about, and for religious Jews, it's all about mitzvot. It's all about doing more mitzvot. And I've heard it said, I don't know who said it, but I've heard it said that God doesn't care if you believe in God. Stacy, nod if it was you that said that. It might have been, I don't know, but it's about what you do with your life, your acts. And so faith is both a Jewish word and maybe not such a Jewish word. But Fiddler on the Roof is definitely a Jewish F word.
Okay, so let's talk about Fiddler on the Roof. So one of my earliest childhood memories was being very scared during the dream sequence, when he has the dream of
Sarah.
Yes, and she comes back from the dead. I don't even really remember exactly what happens, but I remember getting really upset and really scared. But I also remember singing. I took voice lessons as a teenager, and
I've
I
never
remember
heard you sing. I look forward to this.
Maybe someday I'll
Yes.
bless you with that treat.
Please.
I sang Far from the Home I Love, and I still remember most of the words, and it's just such a beautiful song. It's hard to sing.
It's an F song.
It is an F song. It's true.
It is an F song.
Yeah. Well, I want to talk about fasting.
Okay.
So where do you stand? Are you a faster? Do you fast?
Well, this is not a simple question. Okay. I have fasted for many years of my life, even though as a former eating disorders person, it's not probably the smartest thing in the world for me to do, right? Because when I was 17 years old, I kind of fasted for about 2 years. So, it brings up bad stuff. But I will say that for many, many years, decades, I fasted. And for some reason, when I'm fasting, if it happens to be Yom Kippur, which is the only time I would ever fast, and I know there's the Gedalia and there's Tisha B'Av and there's all these other times when religiously observant Jews fast. I think there are 4 in the Talmud and maybe even a couple of other minor ones where you can fast. But for me, it's just been Yom Kippur, and it hasn't been a problem. I really move into an altered state where I'm doing Yom Kippur and food becomes unimportant. I will admit the last couple years, I am having a little something in the afternoon, but it's because I know that I'm not supposed to feel sick, and that if you start to feel sick, you should eat something.
Well, my husband taught me.
Are you a faster?
Okay, well, so the last 5 years, I've been either pregnant or nursing, so I have not fasted.
You get a pass.
Thank you. But I will be fasting this upcoming, because I'm not doing any of those things anymore. Those factories are closed. So I
Those
will
factories.
the dairy farm and the baby incubator are not open for business anymore. But I did learn a cool thing. So I'm married to a professional Jew who's very learned and knows lots of stuff. And
yes, we've seen him walking back and forth behind you.
The murderer behind me in the kitchen told me he told me about this loophole. You're allowed to drink water fits to take medicine. And so he has always, sometime around 2-3 p.m. whenever he starts really falling apart, taken an Excedrin, and we do that. And he has been doing it this whole 5 years when I've been not fasting, but we have a little break because it's caffeine and just that little sip of water to wash it down. And I find that we're caffeine addicted people, and the caffeine helps with the hunger and also helps with the caffeine withdrawal.
Which is probably what my headache is about mid-afternoon too.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And I still definitely experience the hunger, and I find that because I'm able to stay conscious and present and dropped in, the fast is really meaningful for me. So fun little tip for anyone.
People always say, I hope you have an easy fast. And I always think, well, why? It's really, it shouldn't necessarily be easy. Shouldn't it be a struggle? I mean, isn't that the whole point of it?
I've heard before, I hope you have a meaningful fast. And I always
it's a much better. I like that better.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Let's keep going through
absolutely
these words. So,
and we will toward the end allow you guys to contribute and participate and raise your hand if you have things you want to add, questions, which we may or may not be able to answer because we're experts at nothing, but we talk a lot.
We are good at talking. That's true. Okay, so all right, so fence around the Torah so you don't accidentally F up. Tell me, I think you wrote that. Tell me what
I did write that, and
to.
I hope everyone will forgive me for saying F up, but really that's what the fence around the Torah is about. It's this idea that, well, why do we observe certain holidays for 8 days when in Israel it's 7? Because at one time it was very difficult to know when the day ended. We didn't have calendars. We certainly didn't have computers and all the things now. So it was just so that you were sure to observe the holiday for the whole time, an extra day was added. So that would just be one example.
Oh, okay.
There are many examples like that, like why, like not eating, milk and meat is so that you don't boil
you shouldn't cook a kid in its mother's milk.
That. And no, you're not really doing that, but if apparently mixing milk
chickens don't make milk
too close.
But maybe
notice the hand motions.
Yeah.
So that is all part of the fence around the Torah. I think Reform Jews, and Stacy, please nod if I'm saying this correctly, a little bit less on the fence around the Torah thing than more halachic or Jews who really live according to Jewish law. And you can unmute yourself.
Door.
Tell me a little bit more about what you mean there.
What do I mean there? Well, first of all, I am, as a Reform Jew, as a very observant, probably Reform Jew for a Reform Jew, less concerned about whether I don't exactly toe the mark on halakha. So therefore, for me personally, I think offense isn't as important. That's what I meant. But was I wrong?
That makes sense. There is no wrong here. Everybody has their own standard of observance. And one of the things I really appreciate you're saying, even though it wasn't an F word, is about being a very observant Reform Jew. And sometimes people use reform synonymously with I don't do much Jewishly. So I appreciate you making that distinction and saying that you're an observant Reform Jew. I love that.
Well, I grew up as a conservative Jew, and my family was way less observant when we were conservative than my family was over the years that we belonged to Rodef Shalom and lived our life as Reform Jews. And it was very much a conscious choice to do that. But I think, it's the differences are not in degrees of observance. That's why I separate it by, how much of Jewish law for me, it's a lot, often the spirit of the law is more important than the actual detail of the
It seems to me also, my observation is that sometimes the decisions about, when it comes to Reform Judaism, sometimes the decisions about what's okay and what's not come from the spirit of inclusiveness, whereas that's not always the priority when the rules are being decided in other flavors of Judaism. Which
is something that I've always questioned, because the inclusiveness is really about seeing the spark of the divine in everyone. It's about B'Tselem Elohim, right? And that is to me, so fundamentally a Jewish value, that to exclude people, even from excluding people from the rabbinate, or excluding people from being in a minyan or whatever it is, just seems to me antithetical to Jewish values. But yeah, I feel that way about a lot of things.
Me too. Well, okay. So now we've got one of our favorite things to talk about is feasting.
Oh. She went from fasting to feasting.
Well, that's so often how it goes. So let me talk, actually, since we were talking about fasting and now we're talking about feasting, I want to share the break fast ritual that Evan and I have had since way before we had kids, since I think the first year we did the High Holy Days together. So I'm a lifelong, well, I grew up in a conservative synagogue, but always never grew up keeping kosher, summer camp devotee. And I'm married to a guy who we very much come toward each other, but he had a very, very religious.
He was from,
faith.
There's an F.
He was from, yeah.
He was from.
Well, yeah, he was for a while. And like I said before, professional Jew. So we had to do a little bit of dancing to get, to figure out how we wanted to do our shared Jewish life together. And one of the things that we did that is one of my most favorite, I don't know if I've ever told you about this before. So he keeps kosher, and one of the, and our home is kosher. And one of the early ways that we found connection was that I would make him some of his favorite treats before he started keeping kosher, but I'd make kosher versions of them. So he had been.
Does
telling
everyone
me
know that
this
Gabby is
in,
an incredible
2012.
cook? I just have to throw this in. I just want everyone to know that you have cookbooks, you had a television show, Young and Hungry, you were the broke ass gourmet.
Thank
Gabby
you, Gary.
is a food maven. Okay. And at some point we should share the names of your books because they're so wonderful. Hot Mess Kitchen, fabulous. Sorry, I digress. Go on.
So, thank you. It's okay. So Evan loves pot stickers, dim sum, a lot of pork and shrimp. So every year at Yom Kippur, I spend the days leading up to Yom Kippur making kosher, tons and tons of kosher Chinese pot stickers. And I perfected my recipe. You would not know that they're not made of pork and shrimp. And then we, under normal circumstances, when we're in shul, or if we're Zooming shul, we rush home and I fry them all up, and then that's what we break our fast on. And I highly recommend dim sum break fast. It's a good one.
And now you've walked right into having to do a cooking demonstration on Zoom for the Road of Shalom community because we all want to know how to make those. Maybe Julie will invite you over for one of her cooking classes. You can make them together.
I'd love it.
How many people break fast with like bagels and hard-boiled eggs? Like this, like same old yes, because that's what you did growing up, and that's I don't know why. It's breakfast, break fast. So you start with an egg. I start with a cup of coffee, always. In the courtyard at Road of Shalom.
Coconut water is good too.
That's probably a much smarter way to go. And before we, I just want to jump back to the topic of Fiddler on the Roof for just a minute. And I'm very sorry that it scared you as a little kid. And that's probably something to keep in mind before you let your daughters see it, that you wouldn't want them to get scared. The film came out in 1971. I learned this week in doing a little bit of research on it. And the Broadway show was like 1964. It's really interesting. There's a new documentary coming out about the making of the movie that is, I believe, coming out. Everything I read said spring of 2022. So we should all keep our eyes open because it's supposed to be amazing. The documentary that came out a few years ago, I think it was 2017, about Fiddler on the Roof was great. And this is going to be very different than that.
Okay.
I did a lot, I think, for elevating.
Well, I'm looking forward to that.
Image of Jews everywhere. Fiddler on the Roof was so successful, so phenomenally successful.
Yeah. I have also heard sort of a counter argument to that, which is that there are a lot of, it's a beautiful story, but that there are a lot of stereotypes in it that people who didn't know anything about Judaism or Jews glommed onto. Have you ever
For
heard that before?
instance, I haven't, but it makes sense. But what would you say they are? Oh, like Yenta, the matchmaker, maybe.
Yeah, you know, I mean, I think that to quote Ellie, some of the Ashka normative ideas of old world, I mean, you know, they're based on truth, but old world Judaism, old world Jewish figures. No, I don't know.
I think it was very relatable to a lot of different ethnic groups, this idea of each generation breaking with tradition. We're dealing with that even now with, you know, with our children, and seeing you have to just accept that every generation is living in a different time, and they're going to make different choices based on their life experiences. And so I think it was very relatable in that way. I mean, really being able to see how initially Tevye was like, no, you can't do this. And then, okay, you'll do that, but not this. And then it sort of gradually morphed on. Is it time to bring in our audience?
I want to ask a quick thing. I remember earlier on when we were talking about this a while ago, and before we landed on Yiddish, when we talking about all the F words Jewish edition, you said freedom. So I would just love to hear your take on that. Freedom and the 40 years and the 49 days between Passover and Shavuot, but it all leads back to the F word freedom.
Which is so critical to the Jewish story, to the Jewish journey, that, you know, we have different New Years. We have the New Year of the Trees. We have the New Year that is Rosh Hashanah, but we also have a year that starts when we are freed from slavery, because really that's when life began, or our story really took off when we became a free people. It's interesting because it's not the story of a lot of other cultures. And although freedom is obviously important to all people, it's kind of taken for granted, I think, by people in other cultures or other religions. Whereas for us, it's just core to the story of always remembering what that felt like, or trying to tap into what that feels like today for people who aren't free. It's part of what, you know, gives us our sensitivity and our appreciation for the struggles that people go through. So I think freedom is a uniquely Jewish word. What about you, Gabby?
Yeah, you know, it's something that is unfortunately the need for us to continue to defend freedom is such an evergreen theme. And yet, I love thinking about how we are.
Are you thinking about reproductive freedom right now?
Which just, I'm thinking about a few different kinds of freedoms, and all the people who need to be protected and have their rights protected, especially as their governments or the people who were supposed to take care of them aren't protecting them. And I love being part of a community globally and locally where we take the freedom that we believe we are entitled to and that others are entitled to seriously.